Hello, everybody. I have the great privilege and honor of being able to interview Dr. Robert Malone, who is the discoverer of in vitro and in vivo RNA transfection, the inventor of mRNA vaccines, while working at the Salk Institute. Your CV is humongous, but just to boil it down, you've been the inventor of DNA vaccines in 1988 and 1989. You started this work early on when it was just getting started. Your work has resulted in over 10 patents, numerous publications, and 7,000 citations. So you got your medical training at Northwestern University and Harvard University, and you studied pathology at UC Davis. You have over 100 or close to 100 peer-reviewed publications and published abstracts, and over 11,477 citations, and you're verified by Google as a official scholar. Just very well versed in virology and these vaccines, and you have the most interesting. I'm just fascinated by you because your story doesn't seem like it should be here. Like the mRNA vaccines are your baby. So should we take them or not? Should we take these mRNA vaccines or not, sir?
Oh, that's your first question.
I'm sorry.
Well, let's just jump straight into it.
Yeah.
First off, I'm a licensed physician in the state of Maryland, and physicians across the U.S. are in danger of losing their license if they make certain kinds of statements. And one of the statements that I could make that could cause me to lose my license is to advise you on whether or not to take a vaccine. So I'm going to talk around it, and you'll forgive me for doing it because I can't give you a straight answer. It's not that I wouldn't like to give you a straight answer, and we could talk about your medical history and your personal situation, and then we could kind of come to an agreement about what might be the right answer for you. But I can't say that to a general audience on a podcast, or they'll shoot me, metaphorically speaking. So I'm sorry. Here's my position currently, okay? And I know that you have a group that is your audience, that I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you, Alana, and to your audience. So let's get that out of the way. And I understand from speaking with you that your audience is a group that's very interested in reproductive health and other related issues, and I infer also in ethics, because that's kind of a foundation for all of that.
Yeah.
So, diving into your question, I'm reminded of the expression where angels fear to tread, fools walk in, and so I'm gonna jump in as a fool rather than as an angel. Here's the position that Peter Navarro and I have put out that I think is defensible, and it's consistent not just with good science, but also with good ethics. It's my opinion that the vaccines have demonstrated sufficient benefit to risk ratio in selected populations. Those populations include the very elderly, morbidly obese, immunodeficient, and people with certain other pre-existing conditions. The probability of you having as a young, healthy woman who's clearly not morbidly obese is that your probability of dying from COVID is in the range of 0.001% or less. Okay, so for most of us, the probability of us dying from COVID, even with these very inadequate medical management that's been occurring, is so remote as to, it's in the same range as if you were to drive your car for thousands of miles and your probability of dying from a car crash. It's kind of in the same range as your probability of dying from a car crash. And if you have early treatment available, medical treatment, and there's a number of medical treatments that are available right now and others that are being developed. Just like Joe Rogan, your probability, and Joe Rogan is quite a bit more obese than you are, and quite a bit older than you are. He popped out of it pretty quickly because he got aggressive early medical care, as did the former president of the United States, as you'll recall. So the point is, your risk of severe disease and death from SARS-CoV-2, even the Delta variant, is quite low. I'm going to talk about some other risks that are related to reproductive health. Many women have reported, and I'm going to speak about risks relating to the vaccine now. Okay, so the good news for young women, if there is good news here, is that the risks of cardiac complications are, in general, clotting disorders, which is one of the big problems here, seem to be lower for women than for men and young men. Okay, so if I go through the data and calculate the relative risk for young men, adolescent men, to develop heart disease, it's significantly higher, about a third higher, for those young men than it is for you as a young woman. So that's good news for you personally. It's not necessarily good news for everybody. The risks to your baby if you take vaccine in terms of birth defects or other complications remain unknown. They're not characterized. There's a whole lot of unknowns here. So those risks are not characterized well yet, and we know that because the CDC has told BioNTech, I'm sorry, the FDA has told BioNTech in the recent market authorization letter, this is what we call the license letter, that they need to perform long-term studies of safety in pregnancy. The NIH just the other day, I think it was in the last week, funded a trial to look at the effects of vaccine on menstruation, because you may know in your community that many women are reporting alterations of their menses post-vaccination. And I can't believe that we're still having this kind of discussion in the 21st century, but even the press that went out from the NIH at the time they announced this study that's just got funded, it hasn't even started. Okay, they cast shade on women, and that historically women have been hysterical and have alteration in their menstrual cycles. I personally find that just amazingly dated messaging. And I was a little shocked when I read it. My opinion is that women understand their bodies, and if they're saying that they're having menstrual irregularities, they're probably really having menstrual irregularities, not hysteria.
I like you so much.
Whatever you want to call it.
I like you so much for saying that. Thank you.
So yeah, that's kind of bedrock for me. But I've been married a very long time to my high school sweetheart, and we've had a journey together. And I'm, it's old language now; it's all outdated. I would say that we were both feminists, in the sense that really what that is the way we come at it, respecting people regardless of their gender. And I think that's the core of it, you know. So the truth behind that is clearly that the government, whatever they may say about the safety in pregnancy and the safety in reproductive health, much like their assertions about the third jab that they're now backtracking on, the truth is that the CDC has made a series of statements about safety in pregnancy and safety in reproductive health for women that they don't have the data to support. So you can interpret that however you want, but if you read the language that they use an odd kind of contrarian construct. They say, well, we don't have convincing data that it isn't safe. Now, in my opinion, and all my training and all my experience for decades, that's not good enough. You know, the absence of proof does not prove the absence, right? So just because we don't have the data to say it's safe, with pharmaceuticals and vaccines, we don't automatically assume they are safe. We assume that they're potentially not safe. We don't recommend them for people until we know that they are safe. That's kind of the FDA's core mission. They seem to have gotten lost in the woods a bit. I'm trying to say this gently.
They truly have.
I could say it much more strongly.
A lot of people in our community are terrified that there's a eugenics component to this, that they're trying to make us infertile. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but would you agree that we're not wrong for being concerned about our future fertility for taking these?
I completely, I think that as a young person, regardless of gender, you do need to be concerned. Now, you also need to be aware that the virus infects reproductive tissues in males and females.
Mm.
So there is a focus on, I'm just telling you straight, there's a focus on the risks of vaccine, and my position on all of this is that we need to stop hiding the risks. That it's a fundamental tenet of bioethics and medical practice that people have the right to refuse procedures and interventions, and they have the right to full informed disclosure of potential risks. They should not be coerced or let alone mandated to accept a medical procedure. That is the way I was brought up. That's illegal. That's like one of these bedrock things. What I'm trying to share is the truth of what the data show. But to be fair and balanced, we do, and it's important for your audience to recognize that there are reproductive risks associated with the virus itself for both males and females. Okay.
I appreciate honesty very much.
So this is one of those no-win situations where there's no right answer.
I want to jump into. Go ahead.
I was going to say the risks. So in sum, the risks of the virus for you for death or severe disease, if you represent your audience in terms of just your age and your body form, and I haven't asked for your medical history and to find out if you have a genetic disorder of immunodeficiency or something, but the risks of the disease are fairly low. The risks of the vaccine are also fairly low of those risks that we know. But to be honest and forthright, we don't have sufficient information to give you a definitive answer about the risks in terms of reproductive health the observation of alterations that is repeated again and again and again by women, that they have these menstrual irregularities, and even more worrisome are the postmenopausal women that begin to menstruate after vaccination. That's just weird. That's if you want a clear indication that something's not right, that's it. In terms of the reproductive effects here. So in the honest truth is, we do not have the data to evaluate the impact of these products on the health of your fetus. We also, there are data suggestive that in addition to these menstrual irregularities, there may be spontaneous abortions, so premature abortion occurring. And the problem is that occurs fairly frequently in the general human population. You may experience that as a heavy flow, even if it happens in the first trimester. And so how do we characterize and quantitate whether there's an increased risk of abortion, spontaneous abortion in the first and second trimester, or is it just that folks are more sensitized to those issues because of the vaccine discussion? And the honest truth is, those studies are still ongoing right now. So when the CDC says you should take the jab, the truth is, as I see it, I cannot give you, and I assert that the CDC cannot give you definitive information to demonstrate the safety of the vaccine product to your baby or to your fetus. So I'm going to stop there for a minute.
I've heard you criticize the FDA approval publicly. Would you mind repeating for our audience why the FDA approval is more or less a bait and switch, how they're being dishonest on that?
So the government really wanted to have the justification that they needed to move forward with mandates. And they had been wanting to move forward with vaccine mandates before, and myself and others, many people raised objections that this was really not legal to mandate a product when it wasn't yet licensed. And so there was a big push to obtain the document that would say this product is licensed, and so that they could do things like mandate members of the military take the jab, and mandate that healthcare workers take the jab, and to provide the legal support to allow companies, that's probably even more important, to mandate that their workers take the jab or get fired, because if it wasn't licensed, then they were really on risky ground legally. Whether it's a coincidence or not, they dropped the market authorization, which is what we call licensure. I mean, remember, the FDA regulates interstate commerce. So what these documents are really is the FDA saying it's okay for you to proceed with marketing, which means advertisements targeting you, which you haven't, you may think that they've been advertising to you, but technically they haven't. They've been getting the media to run stories on you. Now they're going to come at you with full-on, advertising campaigns and, the things that you're used to seeing on television if you watch television anymore, or the pop-up ads when you go on YouTube. So that's coming, and they dropped this. They gave the press press releases and said, please write articles about this, that we're going to have full licensure on Monday, so that the press had their articles ready at that time. And they really grossly oversimplified what they had actually done. So then the actual event happened, and many of us, including myself, scrambled to figure out what had they actually done and had they justified it. Forgive my cough. What they actually did was they legally split the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine into two legal entities. There's the Pfizer vaccine, quote unquote, that is, I say that, calling it Pfizer. That was granted an extension of the emergency use authorization. Then they legally split that vaccine product into another product and gave that other product the formal licensure authorization. That product has a name now. It's called Fertility. So it's substantially the same as the Pfizer product, but legally distinct. Why is that? The emergency use authorization Pfizer product, if any of your listeners have taken the jab, those that have, they probably did not receive what's called a package insert, for example, which is that little slip of paper that says, these are the studies that were performed, in a short summary. These are the risks associated with the vaccine. These are the potential benefits. There's the pharmacology, blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of stuff in that fine print that you can get even when you buy a bottle of aspirin from Walmart. So none of that exists for Pfizer, which is to say that for the Pfizer EUA, none of us received full informed disclosure about risks. We were just told to take the jab, pretty much, right?
Or experiments.
And trust us. It was kind of a trust me, I'm with the government, right?
Yeah.
So now what the FDA did is they extended the emergency use authorization for the Pfizer product that's currently in the freezers all across the United States. And so that is still the unlicensed EUA product. Then they granted market authorization with some requirements to the German company called BioNTech, which is partnered with Pfizer, that developed the vaccine. Pfizer manufactures and distributes it, and presumably will be marketing it. So you probably get Pfizer ads, not BioNTech ads, pushing vaccine. But when the FDA authorizes a product, they also have to authorize all the packaging information and the labeling that goes on the label of the bottle and the package insert, and they have to approve how the box looks and the words on the box and everything else. And they actually have to approve a lot of the marketing information too, the advertisements. So those have to be run through FDA and compliant with FDA. So it makes sense that you cannot go down to Walmart and buy the Comirnaty labeled licensed product. It's not available because they have to go through this whole process of manufacturing, filling. It's called fill and finish, and labeling and packaging. And they couldn't do that beforehand because they didn't have the FDA approval for what has to go on all those documents, what the label needs to say and what the box needs to look like and all that kind of stuff. So now they're busy doing that. And at some point in time, there will be a Comirnaty BioNTech / Pfizer vaccine in the freezers at Walmart or Walgreens or CVS or wherever you go. But they're not there yet. So that's the starting point. Now there's other stuff below that. There's a whole lot of detail.
Sure.
When the FDA did this, they did it the day before a series of manuscripts, academic publications came out that looked at the adverse events, that's the bad things that can happen with the virus, with the vaccine, and the efficacy or effectiveness, which is, how good is it at protecting you from various things like infection or disease, with the Delta variant. And it was shortly before the data came out showing that natural infection is up to 20 times more protective from death and disease than the vaccine is. Mm-hmm. So to a skeptic's eye, it looks like they did this in a very convenient way where they dropped the thing right before a bunch of information came out that would point to the FDA having acted prematurely. Because we now know that the vaccine actually doesn't, all the data that were used to justify the licensure package were for virus strains that really are no longer circulating. So it's all obsolete. So the benefit part of the packaging, in terms of what it's going to do to protect you from the virus and from the disease, is all based on obsolete information. And immediately after they issued this, then new information became available. I guarantee they knew that new information at the time they did this, mm-hmm. Because that's how it works in my business, is they become apprised of new information before the rest of us do, generally. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what happened. And then the FDA, in their wisdom, decided that, and this is, I'm not making this up, it's written, there's a couple of other bombshells in the disclosures around the authorization letter. The FDA decided that in the normal process, there's an external review committee, an independent scientific committee that overlooks all the data and raises questions and pokes and prods and concerns and things like that and the FDA has to take their opinions into consideration when they make a decision whether or not to license a product. And there's also a period of consumer input where folks like yourself or your audience can communicate their concerns. The FDA determined that the licensure of this vaccine was so clear and compelling and non-controversial that they would just not convene those hearings and that independent scientific review because it was not controversial, and so there was no reason to do it. I've never heard of that happening before. Yeah, so how convenient. Wow. And then the other big bombshell that's within these documents, I don't know if you recall, but many of my detractors do. I went on Tucker Carlson, it seems like a year ago, but I think it's only a couple of months ago. And Tucker wanted to push me down various rabbit holes, but what I did disclose was that the database that the CDC is using to try to capture adverse events associated with vaccination is not able to do so effectively. And it's very biased. It actually grossly underreports between 10 and 100-fold the events of things like death or birth defects or anything else that they self-report. So that was very controversial at the time, and I was attacked for that. But then in the FDA's own letter to BioNTech, they say specifically that the FDA database, the CDC database and the other databases that the CDC is accessing are insufficient to detect rare adverse events from the vaccine. And so they required that BioNTech do, I think it's 10 or 12 additional studies. Many of these relate to the health in young people and children, adolescents, etc. They also involve this pregnancy study There's a long-term cardiac risk study, etc. That, you know, and that one goes for 5 years. So they've given licensure to this product. They bypassed their normal review processes. They relied on outdated data that's no longer relevant to Delta. They don't include the adverse events that were disclosed the day afterwards in a large study published in the New England Journal of Medicine. And they bypass their normal procedures, and they acknowledge that actually all this data that the CDC is pushing on us relating to VAERS is not adequate to actually detect rare problems associated with the vaccine. And the problem with that is that, yes, the vaccine adverse events are generally rare, although there are a number of them that are fairly common. You know, the brain mental effects, the soreness, myalgia, other things. It seems like the dysmenorrhea is fairly frequent. But the CDC doesn't officially recognize any of those as problems. Another one that's clear with the vaccine is viral reactivation. So that, you may know of that as shingles, but there are other viruses that are latent in most of us. About half the population has cytomegalovirus. Epstein-Barr virus is another one. And these are things that kind of sit latently in our body and are controlled by our immune system. But for some reason, after vaccination, these viruses are able to kind of jump out from their hidey holes and cause disease in people. So that may account for a fair amount of the adverse events that people experience after they take vaccine. May actually not be directly due to the vaccine, but due to the vaccine turning on other viruses that are hiding. So there's a lot going on here, and that was a whole lot of words. I hope I didn't put you to sleep.
No, I'm very interested in all of this. You had said something that was really interesting to me about the, you had said, let me put this, it was about some people, the COVID virus causes just regular flu-like symptoms. And then for some reason, for some people, the disease is a hyper-inflammatory response to the virus. And there's a distinguishing that needs to be done there with the cytokine storm, the hyper-inflammatory response, and why some people are winding up in the hospital and not. And what is that difference between people, and how does that play into choices we should make at home to avoid getting sick and going to the hospital? If that makes sense.
So, yeah, it does make sense, complete sense, and thank you for paying attention. So now we're talking about the disease, not the vaccine, just to be clear, although there is some overlap with some of the symptoms of the disease and some of the symptoms caused by the vaccine, just to say it. Okay, so now we're talking about the disease. Most physicians and scientists now agree that the disease has two fundamental phases, at least two. Some people are lumpers and some people are splitters, but we can generally agree that there's two fundamental phases. When the virus initially infects you, and remember that how the severity of how hard it infects you relates to a whole bunch of things, not the least of which is how much virus did you get. So there can be higher virus doses. If you're kissing somebody that has very active infection and they didn't know it yet, versus if you happen to walk by them and there's some droplets in the air that you breathe in. You can appreciate those are different situations. So once you get infected, the virus causes a flu-like syndrome, and your body starts reacting to that. And there seems to be kind of a tipping point in that response of your body to fighting off the virus that happens, and some people think that it happens sooner with Delta because Delta replicates at much higher levels, maybe 200-fold higher than Alpha and Beta. Whether or not you're vaccinated, by the way, it's the same. Once you're infected, you get a lot of virus produced. And you're producing a lot of virus and sharing it with your family and everybody around you, whether or not you're vaccinated during this phase. So the virus starts replicating in your body, and it spreads virtually throughout your body. It's not just in your lungs. And your body starts mounting an immune response against it. And in people who have certain risk factors, they seem to have a tendency, all of us mount a strong inflammatory response. For some people, it seems to kind of be overactive. Just like some of us are more prone to arthritis or autoimmune disease than other people are. Why is it that some people generate this hyperinflammatory response and some people don't? That's a really good question. Why does it have a gender component? Why are women relatively protected rather than men? Well, there's evidence that some drugs that are that downregulate either the levels of male hormone or the responsiveness to male hormone can be beneficial. So that's more good news for your audience that's largely women. You're more protected than the men are. And that extends through virtually all ranges. I don't know about if you're 80, but pretty much throughout the course, women are better protected, and there may be an androgen component to that risk in males. There's also the risk associated with morbid obesity. So there's, just to put a pin in that one, there's an editorial out in the Washington Post today that it should be okay for physicians to ration medical care for the people that didn't take vaccine. Well, does that mean that we can ration medical care for the people that ate too many hamburgers or drank too many sodas, right? So where does that stop? Right. But that's going on all over the world right now. Is people are getting so wound up over this, and they're basically saying the subtext, and it's been said in the Toronto Star, basically, let the unjabbed die if they get COVID.
Yeah.
Not recognizing that both vaccinated and unvaccinated can get the virus and have disease and die from the disease.
Right.
So the vaccine is not for protecting you perfectly from death and disease. So then there's the risk factor of obesity and why. That's one of the big questions. So we talked about why are men more susceptible? Why are the obese more susceptible? They may have, basically, obesity is associated with increased vascular inflammation. So something about being obese that makes your blood vessels have more inflammation. So obesity is not a healthy condition, and it sets you up for other inflammatory diseases, and including cardiac disease, because basically your blood vessels are sick. And this is truly this isn't, yes, it's a pulmonary disease, and it's also a kidney disease, and it's also a brain disease. But what it really is a disease of your blood vessels, particularly your microvasculature, that's capillaries and that kind of stuff. And so those tissues are already in a state where they're partially damaged from obesity. So that's one of the leading thoughts. Now, there's also in both vaccine and in the disease itself from the virus, there is risk of blood clotting. And it's one of the major complications associated with the virus. There's something about the virus that's triggering blood clotting. And by the way, it's also happening with the vaccines to a lesser extent. And the blood clotting that's happening is kind of an odd form. It's started off a little confusing because it's not so much that you're forming big clots like you would if somebody hit you with a stick or something like that, or you sat around in an airplane and didn't move and then developed blood clots in your pelvis because your blood was just static sitting there. It's an odd kind of blood clotting that often involves your small vessels. Remember I said this is a small vessel, blood small vessel disease. But in addition to that kind of thing, and that's measured through tests like D-dimer is something you might hear about. And it can be treated. By the way, aspirin may help. There may be some downsides to aspirin, but aspirin may help. There are drugs like apixaban that are oral, and then low molecular weight heparin, which is an injectable that you get if you end up in the hospital. So there are things that docs use to treat this blood clotting disorder. And there is signs that the virus is triggering some autoimmune disease problems, and the vaccines also trigger this to a lesser extent, involving the development of antibodies that attack your platelets. Platelets are super important for clotting. The way aspirin works is basically by slightly poisoning your platelets so they don't work so good. Okay, so platelets are important, and too many platelets is a problem. Too few platelets is a real problem. Antibodies to platelets is a problem, and both the virus and the vaccines are associated with something called thrombotic thrombocytopenia, and also associated with autoantibodies that bind platelets. So how much of that is an autoimmune problem with the virus and potentially also with the vaccines? How much of it is directly mediated by the spike protein? And how much of it is due to other effects like the damage to your vascular endothelium? That's all still, the scientists are all arguing with each other and trying to figure out the answer to that one.
Right.
So you asked about some of the risks associated with the virus. Now, the virus also influences your central nervous system. And so you may or may not have followed CNN when Chris Como got infected. He had full-on hallucinations. That's actually fairly common. Yeah, he had hallucinations. So these mental status changes, and brain fog is a term that's, some people can hardly even, it's like they've got Alzheimer's. They can't remember where they are, what they're doing, and hopefully that goes away. And that may have an inflammatory component, but for sure, the native spike protein opens up the blood-brain barrier, which is basically the gates that you have between your central processing unit, your brain, and everything else in your body. And so that means that viruses and toxins and other things can get across that couldn't normally get across. So, and then people have various forms from the virus, various forms of, and to some extent with the vaccines, much lower, of peripheral neuropathy, some, potential paralysis, other things involving your peripheral nervous system, not just your brain. So there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. Now, a lot of this seems to, and then of course there's the loss of taste and smell. that doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to many people. And in the absence of treatment, early treatment, that can last for quite a while. Now, almost all this stuff goes away, it seems, in most people, if you get early therapy, largely involving anti-inflammatory drugs, but now also available is monoclonal antibody treatment like Donald Trump got. Okay, so the bottom line is, if you do get infected, especially somebody like you, that's a healthy younger person that isn't morbidly obese, and you haven't been sucking down Pepsis and going to McDonald's every afternoon, then if you do get infected and you feel like you losing, you feel short of breath, or you've lost your taste or smell, or you have headaches and night sweats and those other kinds of things, what you need to do is get early therapy as soon as possible.
Right.
And the problem is that most docs won't do it.
Right.
They're not allowed to do it.
Right.
So that's a problem too.
We're publishing places, the names of clinics where they are prescribing the ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, zinc protocols, the Zelenko protocols. We're publishing where people can go to those clinics. But that kind of leads us to the repurposed drugs with a high safety profile that have been around for years. You had said that a patent only lasts 20 years and then it becomes financially not that attractive for producers. Can we talk? We've been talking a while, but I just wanted to make sure that we touched on this. What's the role of corruption and patents and money and this whole COVID conversation? Because I know that you had quite a time when you did invent mRNA and there was patents being created that you got PTSD because the drama and the politics was so crazy. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on the role of patents and money on COVID. It's fascinating to me.
So there's a lot of conspiracy talk about what's really going on, and it's really hard. Even I've been obsessing about it, as you might imagine, for quite a while now, and I've had my own journey with drug repurposing with our work with the Department of Defense, and we're finally able to start trials with our repurposed drug combination of famotidine and celecoxib. So that's the trade names are Pepcid and Celebrex, which, by the way, should never be used with dexamethasones. Just want to be clear on that. So we've had our own journey with the team I've been involved with, in which we've just been blocked at all kinds of levels, ability to publish and many other things. And I also sit on what's called the active committee at NIH. So this is the committee that, and I'm a non-voting member. Most of the voting members are NIH scientists or members of the pharmaceutical industry. So I've been able to watch this play out. There is considerable evidence that there was basically a conspiracy, you could call it, collusion among scientists at the NIH and FDA and at BARDA to block the availability of repurposed drugs like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and make it so that physicians can't use those drugs, which are off patent and very inexpensive. The way the patent system works is that it's designed, this goes back to Benjamin Franklin, it's designed so that people have an incentive to invent and that they can be compensated for their inventive contributions. Now, you talked about my personal situation. My total compensation for all of those patents having to do with DNA and RNA vaccines was one Susan B. Anthony dollar. So I just want to be clear on that. I did not get rich because I was an employee of a company, and to do that, they make you sign over the rights for everything that you invent while you're an employee. So, and usually the term is you sign over your rights because the patent office law requires that there be some compensation given for this. And so they put into the language that they will compensate you with $1. So that's why I ended up with a plaque and one Susan B. Anthony dollar. I think they actually, it was kind of snark that they sent that to me. So in any case, that's how that part of things work. And the pharmaceutical companies want to make as much profit as possible, of course. And they have all kinds of ways to do that. And they have ways to try to extend the life of the patents. And there's various strategies around that so that they can basically maintain a monopoly for as long as possible. And that allows them to charge much higher rates. So once that monopoly expires, then anybody can make these drugs that is qualified and can make them safely and follow all the rules to make sure they're pure and safe and not adulterated, etc. And behave similarly to the drugs or biologics that were previously marketed under patent. And so that's why you can go to Walmart and you can buy Celebrex brand, or you can buy Pepcid brand, just to use two examples. Or you can get the Equate version at Walmart, not pumping Walmart, just using it as an example that many people know. So that you can buy the generic brand, right? And it's a fraction of the cost. It's the same drug. It has to be the same drug, otherwise the FDA won't allow them to market it. Now, sometimes generic manufacturers get a little fast and loose, and they hope the FDA doesn't catch them. And I don't want to say that everything is perfect in Kansas, because it's not. But in general, that's how things work. So there was this long period where the NIH and BARDA and the FDA actively discouraged any of these generic low-cost drugs for early treatment, and did just a lot of things that don't make sense to try to block them, and to the whole logic that physicians not be able to practice their trade and treat people early in infection just doesn't make any sense at all. But the NIH and all the federal money focused on just treating people in the hospital. And so what that meant is that you're in a position, and maybe many of your listeners may have experienced this, hopefully not, where you go to the hospital and you say, "Doctor, I'm sick. I'm having problems breathing, or have these other symptoms, or I'm having, hallucinations or whatever." And they test your levels of oxygen in your blood, and they say, "Well, you're above 90% or 92%, and so go home and come back when your lips are blue," which is basically saying that your oxygen saturation is about 88 or something like that. So that just doesn't make any sense in terms of medical practice, and it's hard to understand why the government would want to make it so that you couldn't treat early and you couldn't dispense currently licensed drugs off label that were showing efficacy. And that still doesn't make sense. And we've just been through a period of about a week and a half, starting with an FDA tweet that said something pejorative about using horse medicine, y'all. And personally, I found that offensive just out of the box. I tried not to talk down to people, and I certainly don't appreciate when the government talks down to me. Just because I might say y'all from time to time, is just and then we had Rachel Maddow and the whole press push that ivermectin was everybody was going out and get horse ivermectin or sheep ivermectin or cow ivermectin and treating themselves from Tractor Supply in southern states. And, and they were making fun of everybody that was doing this. My comment on Bannon was, look, these people have no options. Their docs won't treat them and with early on. And you're forcing them to go to veterinary medicines because they don't have any other options. And now you're making fun of them. It's kind of a lot like Facebook deleting everybody that used to be on that chat room talking about their adverse events, or the government making fun of women and saying that they're being hysterical because they're reporting irregularities in their menstruation. It just bothers the heck out of me, and I'll just leave it at that, or I'm going to start swearing. I'm really upset by a lot of this. It bothers me a lot. I've taken ivermectin and had clinical response. Nobody cares much about me, but they certainly cared about Joe Rogan. And so at the end of this 2-week period of just constant press about how everybody's running out to Tractor Supply to buy horse medicine, and not recognizing that ivermectin has been around for 40 years. It was awarded the Nobel Prize. It's on the WHO Essential Medicines list, as is hydroxychloroquine. Oh, which, by the way, I should mention, when I was repurposing drugs for Zika, you'll recall that's a birth defect problem also, and focused on that. One of the things I'd identified was hydroxychloroquine. Well, why was hydroxychloroquine on our list for repurposed drugs for Zika? In addition to its antiviral properties, it was known to be safe in pregnancy. Okay, so that's something to know about hydroxychloroquine. Now, hydroxychloroquine, like a lot of drugs, if you take too much, it can kill you. Okay, so don't take too much. Okay, take it with. That's why it's under prescription, because doctors know what too much is, and they can make sure you take the right amount and not too much if they're allowed to practice medicine.
Okay.
So ivermectin, literally billions of doses have been given out. Merck has long touted that they give it out widely in Africa. And then suddenly they put out this press release that ivermectin isn't safe. Now, that press release came out after they had bought rights for a drug developed by Emory, then licensed by a company called Ridgeback. And now Merck has bought that drug and is developing it as a therapy for COVID. Likewise, Pfizer has tried to trash ivermectin, and I've seen their representative do it in the active committee meetings. And they have, and they're now saying explicitly, we're not going to be able to control this virus with just vaccine. We're going to have a drug. And oh, by the way, they've got a drug in development that they're just about to start the clinical trials with. So cynical people like me, and perhaps you, might say, this sounds an awful lot like a conflict of interest, that these people are busy trashing stuff that they can't make money off of, that are being marketed by small companies, basically running as small businesses, places like Edenbridge, which is the major supplier of ivermectin for the United States, because they can't make their big bucks off of those. They make their big bucks off of patented medicines. Okay. And so now, and we've got Tony Fauci trashing ivermectin, and going on CNN and saying this isn't safe, despite it being known as one of the safest drugs in the world. And at the other side of his mouth, he's touting these new patented drugs that are being developed with his money through Pfizer and Merck. So now I've finished my rant. I'm going to take the next question.
I love listening to you. I kind of promised myself that we would keep it to a half an hour. Now we're at an hour. So I guess I'm really intrigued as to what news sources you trust and what publications you trust, because you're clearly able to distinguish between science that's intellectual and truth seeking and like profit science with a dollar sign. And a lot of people can't make that. They can't discern that.
Or I would call it a lot of it's propaganda. And one of the things that's come out is that unfortunately we've learned, and it's been, I can't tell you how disillusioned I am with my profession and what's going on, and the regulatory authorities and the U.S. government. It just, I was already well disillusioned from the World Health Organization, having been there enough times and dealt with them enough times that I know they're just a political body. They are not seekers of truth. But in my opinion, but in terms of news sources, I don't know what to say. I don't know who to point you to. What I try to do with the Twitter feed is give the community, the global community, access to information. And I'm trying really hard to help coach, just like here. I've spent hours and hours and hours basically trying to teach people about how, things, how to think about these things, how to process this information. And my recommendation is don't just listen to me, think for yourself. And I'm trying, remember, I've had this stupid, I didn't finish my education till I was well in my 30s. I didn't finish paying off my medical debts until I was in my 50s. Okay, so I've had all this training and experience and blah blah blah. So don't expect that it's easy for you to make sense out of all this. It's not, and I don't expect folks to be able to do that all by themselves. But what I am trying to do is give you the primary information as it's coming. Some of it is slanted in an anti-vax way. Some of it's slanted in a pro-vax way. But there's a lot of it that's coming, most of what's coming out of I call it legacy media, CNN, even the New York Times, Washington Post, those big kind of papers, is really propaganda. Mm-hmm. It's designed to control how you're thinking. It's designed to generate fear. Like, to take an example, you may recall all this talk about how all the pediatric beds were filling up. Yeah. And it was assumed that was because of COVID. And we heard this particularly in the South. The Northern press likes to bash the South. And I don't know why they think that's a good idea, but they do it. And there was all this talk about how the pediatric beds were filling up in the unvaccinated. There's even articles coming out now that are basically pushing the same theme, that, basically you're all a bunch of backwoods deplorables and you won't take vaccine and it's your own damn fault. Yeah. And you're putting your kids at risk too. And so it turns out that most of what was happening was respiratory syncytial virus. And respiratory syncytial virus hits the young and the old. But the problem is that the CDC has decided, again, in its infinite wisdom, to stop tracking most breakthrough cases, stop doing good surveillance, not doing contact tracing, and just putting out these press releases to the mainstream press that are just opinions. I mean, they might as well be put on the editorial page. And so this whole push about, oh no, look how the horrible things that are happening in the South because they're not vaccinated, and all these poor children are ending up in the hospitals, and that's why we've got to vaccinate everybody for COVID, and we got to vaccinate all the kids, et cetera, et cetera. No, I'm sorry. That was all a lie, okay? That was respiratory syncytial virus that was doing that, not SARS-CoV-2. Mm-hmm. But they didn't tell you that. Did you hear that before? Are you aware of that?
I might have brushed
so,
over it. I'm not aware of the details. This is new information.
So here's another fun one. Respiratory syncytial virus is another lab leak. It happened in the mid-50s in a lab in Silver Spring in the DC area, where it went from a monkey to a monkey handler, and then it got spread from that monkey handler into the population and all across the world, and it kills a bunch of kids, babies in particular, neonates. And it's a major respiratory pathogen. There's more kids that die from influenza every year than die from SARS-CoV-2. Okay, so my point is that a lot of what you're getting is fear porn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's the press trying to scare you into doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And why they're doing it? Well, they're doing it because the government is basically coaching them. That's what they need to do. You have to kind of, this is a red pill, blue pill thing. If you remember the Matrix, I know it's many years ago. And I'm not Ken Reeves. Sorry about that.
You have a great
he's a pretty
beard.
awesome guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, I got the beard. Okay, good. So Ken, advice, work on that beard. By the way, the beard is not an affectation. I've had a beard since I was 16, and the reason is because I had such bad acne that I found that if I let my beard grow out, then the acne wasn't so bad, and I just never got rid of it. So
that's funny.
Part of that story.
That's why I got bangs at one point, to cover up stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it happens when the hormones kick in.
Yeah.
So there it is.
So the lab leak theory, the red pill. Yeah.
Yeah. So all I can say is think for yourself. And I'm trying to give you access, easy access. So for me, it's really easy to go look through the scientific literature and search on PubMed and do things like that and find key papers, because it's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
But for your average person, not so easy. You haven't spent 30 years doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to give that to you through the Twitter feed, and not so much tell you what you should think, but rather give you the tools so that you can think for yourself and look at the data and make your own opinion. Because that's what the bioethics, okay? The bioethics rules here are that you should have fully informed information about the risks and benefits. And you and your listeners are in control of your bodies. You're the ones that have the right to say no or yes. Now, the government is trying to put all kinds of punishments on this, like you're a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. And the other thing about the government, to use that same metaphor as I like to use, is if you give a 3-year-old a hammer, everything becomes a nail. And that government seems to think that the vaccines are the solution for everything. They're not. Okay. But they're useful for some people. So to get back around to the starting point, at this point, I think they make sense for high-risk people. I don't think they make sense for many people. I think that by trying to jab everybody, what we're doing is we're driving the evolution of virus that will escape vaccines, and then we won't have any protection for those old people anymore. So I think it's just bad policy. And you can read about my opinion on that in these editorials in the Washington Times with Peter Navarro. Why did we publish in the Washington Times? Because no one else would publish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's the problem, is that we have rampant censorship and information control and everything else, and a ton of propaganda coming at you. And as a young person trying to make sense out of all this, all I can say is my heart goes out to you. It's a tough job, but you know, you're one of the people that's helping others by helping them get access to information. And so God bless you for taking the time and effort and commitment to do so. You know, all of us are, you know, you've seen the flack I'm taking, and it just goes on and on. it's not very fun at all. And you're probably taking it too. So,
people like to
let's
call
just,
you names and dismiss you. It's true. But
so let's just stay the course. I'm pretty sure that over time, we're going to bend this arc a little bit. How much, I don't know. And it can always be worse. We could be living in Australia. Those poor souls are locked in their houses right now.
I can't believe it. I thought that they were, like all like Crocodile Dundee, just extremely brave and free. And they're living in a total prison. It's a country built for prisoners. Yeah, we will get the word out. The truth will win. I'm sorry, I'm not like Barbara Walters. We kind of started this media and this outlet because there was a need for it. But I'm learning how to be a better interviewer myself through this whole thing. I just really thank you, Dr. Malone, for taking the time out. I could listen to you all day. You're just a fascinating person, and I hope you either write a biography or somebody includes you in their book, because you just have a completely fascinating story. Thank you for spending time with us.
My pleasure. And, let's try to keep our heads up. Together, we're strong, right?
Right.
You remember, often these Revolutionary War quotes come to mind these days for some reason. One of them is, well, if we don't hang together, we shall surely hang separately. And that's a little rough, but the point is, solidarity can help us with our mental health and everything else.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful for the chance to for your respect and your reaching out and having interest and for the opportunity to help people. I mean, that's why I go into medicine.
To help people.
It's to try to help people. Yeah. So, okay.
Well, thank you for respecting the intelligence of your patients and just us normies, right? Us normal people.
Yeah.
God bless you, sir.
Well, remember, yep. Okay. Be good.